I want to show an example of doing a scatter plot, which is in the homework on correlation in section 10.1. So I'm just going to make up an example. So the first thing you need to do is to enter the data, the X list and the Y values that you want to use. I'm just going to make some up. I'm going to hit stat, as is my usual habit. I'm going to empty out whatever might be in list 1 and list 2 to begin with. So I'm going clear list, and then second L1, comma, second L2, and that clears out those lists. And now I can go to stat, edit, and enter the X values in list 1. I'm going to just use some basic values. I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And for the Y values in list 2, I'll make it 2, 4, 7, 9, 11. Okay, now in the homework, when you enter these things, they're going to ask you to do a scatter plot of these, and we can use the calculator to do that. See, above the y equals, there's this thing called stat plot. So I'm going to hit second, the y equals, and that gives me the stat plot. And this is a way of editing the plots. And notice it's plot 1, plot 2, plot 3. We're just going to use plot 1. So you might want to make sure that all the other plots are off. And if I hit enter to edit plot 1, off, on, I'm going to turn it on. Enter. And this is the type that you want. There's various types of plots. You want this first one, you can arrow over and change it, but we're not going to use those other ones. So have the first one, enter, and then the X list are the values in list 1. The Y list, the Y values are in list 2. We're going to have a little square for the mark. You can use pluses or other things. That doesn't really matter so much. So now, when I go back and get out of here, okay, and if I go to the Y equals menu, you see, notice that the plot 1 is on. Okay, now I purposely put this log, this little junk in Y1 there, just to show you what can happen. So if I go zoom, this is to get the stat plot, and go down to zoom stat, and hit enter. See, it's giving me an error, and this is pretty common because I have that stuff in the Y equals. If I hit go to, let's see what happens if I hit go to, where it's going to take me. You see, it went right here. It didn't like having anything in the Y1 thing, so I'm going to clear that out. And before you try to do a stat plot, you should make sure that all of these Y equal things are cleared, because if there's anything in there, it will often cause an error when you're trying to do a plot. And now, if I do plot 1, if I go to, now that all the Y's are cleared out, the plot 1 is on. I should mention, you see how it's highlighted there? There's a toggle for that. If I arrow up, it's flashing, and hit enter, and arrow back down. You see now it's not dark anymore. It's not highlighted, so the plot is off. If I go back up there and hit enter again, now the plot is on. And once the plot is on, I guess it, let's see, if I now go to zoom stat to plot that, let's see, enter. Yeah, now we get a nice scatter plot of those points. Just one more comment. They asked for regression in the homework. I don't think they ask for this, but if we do the linreg t-test, which we're going to do in this section on these data points, There it is, F, enter. Okay, so this is the way you want it, list one, list two, like this. I have the regression equation blank, which for the homework I think is fine, but I can automatically put the regression equation into that y1 variable in the graphing part of the calculator. So if I enter there, if I go vars, and then yvars, and then function, and then y1, see now it put y1 in there, and so now if I go calculate, there's the result of the Lynrigg t-test. The point that I'm showing here is if I now go back to the y equals menu, see it put the regression equation into the y1, and now if I do zoom stat, it's going to give me the points and the regression equation plotted on in the same graph. So if I go down to zoom stat, and hit enter, you get a nice picture of the data points and the regression line. Now, of course, if I go back to y equals, and if I clear out the regression line, and for the purposes of the homework, I think you're better off having this all cleared, and go to zoom stat again. It'll just give me those points. The place where it gives you an error is where you have some junk in that y equals menu, and I've seen people's calculators having some junk in there. I don't know how it gets there or why it gets there, but you want to make sure that those things are cleared out before you do zoom stat to get a stat plot. If you get an error, that would be something to look for. See if your y equals, here's the y equals thing again. All these things are clear. Just one other comment that just came to my mind. If you get an error, it could be that your lists, your X list and your Y list, they have to have the same number of values in each one of them. Sometimes it'll give an error called a dim error. Let's just see. Let's see if I clear. Well, let me see. Oh, if I go delete. Yeah. So let's see. Now you see I have only 4 things in list 2 and 5 things in list 1. If I go back to the stat plot from here, I'm pretty sure it'll give me that error that I was talking about. It'll probably say dim error. Let's see what happens. Zoom stat, enter. Yeah, error dimension mismatch. So those are the kinds of things that can happen. I just wanted to warn you about how to do these stat plots carefully using the calculator.